So Chantal, you are the head of the Beliefs and Values Initiative of WWF International. The first time WWF at this level has actually had a program on working with faiths. Before that, you worked for the Alliance of Religions and Conservation with me, which was a great joy, on the illegal wildlife and the illegal forestry. And in that context of the illegal forestry, you became very involved with this whole tradition of ordaining trees within Buddhist culture.
Monks across Southeast Asia are using this practice as a way to raise awareness in communities about the sanctity of nature. So what monks will do is they'll wrap their monk's robes around a tree and bless it and sanctify it as a monk. So when someone in the forest who wants to log or hunt wildlife comes along and sees these trees wrapped in these saffron robes, they know that they're standing on holy ground and that the area should not be disturbed.
The root of this idea lies, I understand, in a Buddhist text about the Buddha saying that if it was necessary in order to save sentient life from the horrors of constant rebirth and the consequences of karma, how difficult was it to take something that's a kind of image and turn it into something so powerfully evocative of Buddhism, which has led to some monks being murdered because of their resistance to logging, because of that belief? How easy was that transition made, or was it something that was always there nascent, i.e. where monks were, the area was protected, that then you helped turn into something proactive?
I think there's been, in recent years especially, a real trend of engaged Buddhism across Asia. So monks are no longer just sitting in the temple praying and reciting prayers, but they feel like their Buddhist principles need to be applied towards social and environmental activism. So the ritual of tree ordination has sort of sprung from that desire to actually put their principles into practice. And if you ask a Cambodian monk why he's protecting the forest, this is what he'll say. He'll say, the Buddha was born, was enlightened, taught, and passed away in the forest. So the forest area is a place to be revered, it's holy. They might also say that in the Buddhist worldview, all life is interconnected. So if we harm other species, if we cut down trees, if we harm wildlife, we're hurting ourselves. And another Buddhist principle that they would talk about is to live simply and to root out greed, because greed they see at the heart of environmental destruction and overexploitation and overconsumption. So it's something to be rooted out. And they might also say that they are practicing and living the Buddhist principle of no harm and trying to alleviate suffering of all sentient beings, human and non-human. So in that way, they've developed practices and rituals that bring out these principles, and tree ordination is one such practice.
Now, you've kind of swapped sides. You started as an environmentalist, not that you aren't now, but you started very much in some of the biggest international environmental organizations. You helped set up for some of them in Asia and so forth. What took you professionally and then personally, what took you into this world of religion? What did you spot that nobody else really was noticing, and why did you go that path professionally and personally? Professionally first.
Yes, it's true. I was living in Cambodia, working for another environmental organization, very much focused on protected area management, setting up conservation work in the country, looking at the illegal trade in animals. When in 2008, I met the most unusual conservationist I'd come across, and that person is a monk called Venerable Bun Salut. And he was the head of a very simple pagoda in the northwest of Cambodia. And when I met him, he was leading the protection of probably the largest and best protected community forest in Cambodia. And he and his fellow monks were out there in the forest, picking up snares, confronting illegal loggers and hunters, and stopping forest crime. So yes, that was a moment that really interrupted my mainstream conservation career, and I thought, I need to understand why these monks are doing this. Why are they out of the temple and in the forest? What's motivating them? And why are they being so effective when conservation organizations are pouring millions of dollars into Cambodia to incentivize people to protect the forest and the wildlife? But I was questioning how sustainable that was. I think it's about what drives people. I was very interested at that moment about why the conservation movement hasn't been looking enough into what really inspires people to protect nature, and that could include their spiritual and religious beliefs.
Now you're in charge of this whole program for WWF. Drawing on your Cambodian experience, where do you see the next stage of this partnership between religions, the environment, and the arts? Where do you see that going worldwide? What are the strengths you see, and where could this be in 10 years' time?
Yes, well, part of our role has been, and with you at the Alliance of Religions and Conservation, has been very much to highlight the inherent teachings in all the different wisdom traditions of the world that speak to nature. So unfortunately, a lot of people of faith do not even understand what teachings around nature are in their own tradition. So part of our role, I think, is to highlight these beautiful stories, these beautiful texts, these poems, these songs, these rituals that really can inspire people to care for the earth. So I hope that is brought out much more in our work. We're really at a moment of opportunity, I think, because religious leaders now around the world are really calling on their communities to protect the planet like no other time in history. And they have the moral authority, they have the moral standing to call for a radical transformation in the way that we view nature, in the way that we treat nature. And in this crisis that we're in, this environmental crisis, we're living through the 6th mass extinction, climate change is bearing down on us. We're now in a global pandemic. So people are seeing the dissolution of these artificial boundaries between human health and planetary health. And there's a call from the Pope, from the Dalai Lama, from religious leaders around the world to take action. And they have the power to shift the attitudes and behaviors of billions of people around the world when it comes to nature conservation and help catalyze the mass civil society change that we need.
Do you find that your understanding of the capacity, the narrative dimension, the emotional dimension that this brings, Do you find that that makes you slightly suspect in the environmental world, or have you seen a shift since you kind of came out of conventional conservation to work for groups working with religions? Are we on a trajectory? Or
Yes.
is there still a lot of kind of, yes, well, that's all very nice and well, but you know, this isn't serious conservation. Is there still that tension?
There's a bit of that tension. I mean, it's still fairly novel for a conservation group to work with a religious leader or a religious community. But I have to say, in the last few years especially, there's been a sea change. And I think the conservation movement is waking up to the value and the power of working with faiths and understanding that 85% of the people on this earth affiliate with a religious or a spiritual tradition. So faith is such a strong motivator and a strong factor in people's attitudes and behaviors towards nature that we can't ignore that. And we work in so many different cultural contexts and religious and spiritual contexts that we need to, you know, become more and more sensitive to what drives people to protect nature.
You're also part, your program in WWF is also part, along with Faithinvest and the International Network on Conservation and Religion, in this faith long-term plans. Mm-hmm. What's that about, and why is that being launched as part of Celebration Earth?
Yes, the faiths have committed to looking at their own institutions, their own communities, their own assets. You know, faith groups own a huge amount of land, and they run half the world's schools. They're very involved with health and with business and with media networks. They have so much reach and power that they are doing a sort of an internal audit process through this commitment to a long-term plan that looks at all these areas where they can influence to put the environment at the top of the agenda. Interestingly, we've been supporting global faith groups in their political advocacy efforts at the UN level. And just yesterday, over 50 faith groups actually signed on to a call to action, urging global policymakers to take urgent action on the environment for this critical next decade. And at the same time, they offered their own long-term commitments, these 10-year commitments to put the environment at the top of their own agendas. So I think it's going to be a really fantastic process for a lot of faith groups across the world to look internally and see how can they engage on biodiversity conservation, more on sustainability, how can they green their assets. So I think it will be a powerful vehicle for change.
Where would you want the faiths to be putting their investments? What are, for you as an environmentalist working with faiths, what are the kind of trigger points where if we could change something in the economic structures and systems, things could change?
There are so many areas, from green energy to sustainable food systems. I would love to see a lot of that money going towards the sustainable use of habitat. Where I work, which is mainly in Asia, there are huge plantations destroying habitat all over. Like, we work in Indonesia where rubber and palm oil, etc., are really destroying habitat. So if there was a way to really invest in sustainable agriculture, sustainable plantation management, I think that could really have a huge impact in Asia in particular.
Do you see much more of an actual pragmatic engagement of the faiths as stakeholders in the planet, not just as preachers to the unworthy?
I think in our work in particular, we are working with faith partners as equal partners in conservation. So a large part of what faith leaders are committed to doing is speaking out about nature. They're fantastic advocates of nature conservation, but we're also very much supporting grassroots faith-based conservation activities on the ground, like in Cambodia, like in Indonesia and India. So there's much more support, technical support from the conservation side for the religious organizations, and they are asking us actually for this support.